How does the hierarchy among Shinto shrines work?
Over the centuries, Shinto authorities have devised a number of structures and classifications by which to distinguish various levels and functions of shrines. The most important is called the shrine rank system, Sheikakusaido. That has been in place since shortly after the Meiji Restoration of 1868. Jingu designates shrines of top rank under imperial auspices, such as Meiji Jingu, in Tokyo, which enshrines royal ancestors, and Ise Jingu, which is at the top of the hierarchy and is called the Daijingu, Grand Imperial Shrine. Next in rank are the approximately 100,000 jinjia, a generic term including virtually all shrines larger than little wayside structures. About 250 are included on a special list of highest-ranking ones. Of these, some 200 were designated prior to World War II as governmental shrines, kansha. Many larger jinjia have spawned affiliated or branched shrines called buncha. Multiple shrines dedicated to a single kami generally constitute distinct families, with one shrine usually acknowledged as the original foundation from which branched shrines developed. Some very important jinjia, such as Kasuga in Nara and about a dozen others, have the honorific title Taisha, Grand Shrine, roughly equivalent to Cathedral Basilica. They are also part of a cluster of 22, Niju Nisha, institutions elevated to special status. But even they are divided into 3 levels, 7 high, 7 middle ranking, and 8 lower. That grouping arose out of the practice of ranking shrines within a given region according to their order of priority on pilgrimage routes, or to guide devotees intent on visiting a sequence of holy places. In various prefectures, a further ranking of area shrines simply lists them as first, second, or third shrine, acknowledging the 3 regional shrines that draw the largest crowds of worshippers. A number of jinjia, some count 138, have been specially designated as nation-protecting shrines. Gokoku jinjia, because of their dedication to the souls of those who died in battle. 27 shrines within that category, also called deceased spirit-invoking shrines, shokansha, have been accorded a special rank because of the importance of the heroes from all periods of Japanese history that they commemorate. Tokyo's Yasukuni Jinjia ranks at the top of that category. Before 1945, countless smaller local memorials represented the bottom of this hierarchical category. The main central administration is called the Association of Shinto Shrines. Jinjia Honcho, which has branches, called Jinjiacho, in each Japanese prefecture.
What signs or symbols distinguish Shinto ritual specialists?
Shinto priests wear distinctive garb, called shozaku, modeled on courtly fashions from the Heian period, the days when Japan's capital was in Kyoto. Ritual robes are of several types. They wear a kimono and a kind of very full-cut pants underneath. Outer garments originally indicated courtly rank with various colors: robin's egg blue, red, purple, yellow, and light green, but now a priest's rank is indicated by either the pale blue, black, or red. Outer garments have very wide flowing sleeves and extend down to the feet. For ordinary ceremonies, priests wear a white silk vestment called a karanigo, hunting cloak from medieval times. With the simpler garments for ordinary duties, priests wear a plain roundish hat called eboshi, reserving the taller and more elegant kanmurai for special ceremonies. High-ranking priests wear polished wooden shoes for rituals, and their subordinates wear thong sandals of wood. During all ceremonies, officiants carry a slender, tapered slab of wood called the shaku in the right hand, similar to the one seen in images of Chinese ancestor figures. Since even a layperson sometimes leads rituals and wears these same garments, they do not function like a habit to distinguish priests from laity. When not performing their shrine duties, Shinto priests wear ordinary street clothes. Shrine maidens, Miko, wear a white kimono top and a vermilion or scarlet split skirt. Only when they are performing shrine duties. Musicians, whether priests or not, also wear similar versions of heian court fashion during ceremonies.
How important is ritual in Confucianism and CIT?
There is perhaps no more fundamental notion in Chinese religious thought than that of li, proper ritual. The Chinese term is composed of two elements meaning sacrifice and spirit more precisely. Contact with the upper world combined with a character that once depicted a sacred vessel. It applies to all religious ceremony, from the most popular to the most official imperial cultic worship. Historically overseen by a ministry of rites. State rituals have generally been the most formal and precise. Pre-modern ritual practice distinguished several levels of ceremony. Supreme offerings, performed mostly by the emperor himself, addressed heaven. Earth, the forebears of the emperor and empress, and the deities of earth and seed. Middle offerings propitiated sun and moon, ancestors of previous reigns. The god of agriculture called Emperor Shen Nung, and the goddess of silk production, Lei Ziyu. Lower offerings occurred in local or regional state temples and revered Guandi as deity of war, Wenzhong as deity of literature, and sage Emperor Fu Shi, among others. When Confucius spoke of Li, he had in mind all of these, plus the entire range of ceremonies enacted on a smaller scale or in private. But more than that, he conceived of Li as informing all proper human relationships.
What were some of the principal CIT ritual occasions?
Ritual responsibilities of the emperor and his official delegates included ceremonies at various major state sacred sites. The altar of the spirits of land and grain, the imperial ancestral temple. The temples of heaven and earth, of sun and moon, and within the audience halls of the forbidden city. At the altar of the spirits of land and grain, Shiji 10, the emperor performed sacrifices in spring for fertile fields and in the fall for plentiful harvest. At the imperial ancestral temple, Taimiao, he led ceremonies associated with the anniversaries of his own ancestors back through the history of the dynasty. There, the ancestors were said to grant audiences with their royal public much as the emperor himself did from his own audience halls. At the Temple of Heaven, the imperial officials offered harvest prayers on New Year's Day, rain prayers at the onset of summer, and announced royal events, such as the designation of the heir to the throne. Within the Forbidden City, various important rituals occurred at the New Year, the winter solstice, and the emperor's birthday. Subjects acknowledged the emperor's lofty authority in the various audience halls of the city's outer court, located just south of the more private palaces of the inner court. The ceremony began early in the morning outside the Meridian Gate, the southern entrance to the Forbidden City. At the sound of 2 drum beats, 3,000 officials in 9 ranks processed into the courtyard before the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Once they were arranged, 3 drum beats announced that the emperor would enter from the Hall of Middle Harmony, just to the north, and take his seat on the throne. Music accompanied his entry and continued as the officials paid homage. Military leaders lined up on the west and civil authorities on the east, both groups facing the central axis of the courtyard. Bird and animal symbolism was arranged on the robes so that the birds and animals of both groups were facing north, honoring the emperor as he sat on the dragon throne within the hall. All of creation was thus symbolically ordered toward the emperor, who represented heaven. After the announcement of the specific occasion for the ritual, music resumed for another round of obeisance to the emperor. Once the emperor had departed, the ceremony ended with an exit procession of all present.
Do Shinto practitioners revere any persons as especially gifted with wisdom?
Japanese tradition generally has held teachers in high regard. But, in the words of one famous Japanese scholar, Shinto is caught rather than taught. As a result, sages, scholars, and teachers do not occupy the place of honor in Shinto tradition to which, for example, Confucianism has elevated them. Human beings are made to worship the divine in all things and to respond in gratitude for countless gifts. Thanksgiving is the wisdom of Shinto. One can encourage it, but most of all it is a gift in itself. Shinto tradition emphasizes first-hand experience of the world and of one's place in it.
What rituals are performed at home?
Confucian rituals performed in the home have historically included Countless ways of expressing various levels of familial relationship. Those that most closely approximate what the majority of people would likely recognize as religious involve ancestor veneration, described in the section on Daoism.
Have the Japanese ever worshipped the emperor? And is the emperor still a religiously important figure?
In early modern times, especially since the Meiji Restoration of 1868, Japanese governmental policy included the veneration of the divine emperor as a central element. Major institutions enshrine 20 of the total number of 124 emperors, as well as 11 princes, and focus on their worship. 7 of the imperial shrines are dedicated to honoring the spirits of rulers who died unfortunate deaths. Since the end of World War II, the role of Japan's imperial family has undergone dramatic changes from its former centrality to culture and religion. People still revere the emperor and his household as noble people, who continue to represent and uphold ancient Japanese tradition. Many venerable and arcane Shinto rituals still occur only behind the walls of the imperial palace. But fewer and fewer Japanese have much interest in those ceremonies. And the emperor no longer has the national priestly status he once enjoyed. Still, many hope a royal son will continue the imperial line long into the future. And some even dream nostalgically of an eventual return to the days when the emperor wielded considerable political power. On the whole, though, it is safe to say that most Japanese no longer regard the emperor as divine and do not think of him or his family as significant religious symbols.
What is the imperial oath in Japan?
The following oath is taken from the 1889 Constitution of the Empire of Japan. It was spoken by the emperor in the sanctuary of the imperial palace. We, the successor to the prosperous throne of our predecessors, do humbly and solemnly swear to the imperial founder of our house, and to our other imperial ancestors that, in pursuance of a great policy coextensive with the heavens and with the earth, we shall maintain and secure from decline the ancient form of government. In consideration of the progressive tendency of the course of human affairs and in parallel with the advance of civilization, we deem it expedient, in order to give clearness and distinctness to the instructions bequeathed by the imperial founder of our house and by our other imperial ancestors, to establish fundamental laws formulated into express provisions of law, so that, on the one hand, our imperial posterity may possess an express guide for the course they are to follow, and that, on the other, our subjects shall thereby be enabled to enjoy a wider range of action in giving us their support, and that the observance of our laws shall continue to the remotest ages of time. We will thereby give greater firmness to the stability of our country, and promote the welfare of all the people within the boundaries of our dominions. And we now establish the imperial house law and the constitution. These laws come to only an exposition of grand precepts for the conduct of the government, bequeathed by the imperial founder of our house and by our other imperial ancestors. That we have been so fortunate in our reign, in keeping with the tendency of the times, as to accomplish this work, we owe to the glorious spirits of the imperial founder of our house and of our other imperial ancestors. We now reverently make our prayer to them and to our illustrious father, and implore the help of their sacred spirits, and make to them solemn oath never at this time nor in the future to fail to be an example to our subjects in the observance of the laws hereby established. May the heavenly spirits witness this our solemn oath.
What temple rites exists in Confucianism?
Confucian temples function principally as memorial halls. They are dedicated to the veneration and appreciation of the great sages, teachers and scholars of the tradition. Honoring the spirit and teaching of the great ones is not quite the same as praying to them in the way that some people pray to deities or to saints believed to have the power of intercession. Honoring the great Confucian figures generally lacks the kind of spontaneity one finds in the much busier Daoist and CCT temples. Confucian rituals tend to be more reserved and orderly and associated with specific occasions. Popular devotion, on the other hand, occurs virtually around the clock, 7 days a week.
Are there any organizations or institutions that have their own distinctive structures of leadership within Shinto?
An important organization in Shinto is the Shrine Guild, Miyazie, composed of village elders who share responsibility for their local clan or parish shrine. Each man agrees to oversee shrine affairs for a full year. Other organizations called Kosa have occasionally sought to raise funds to send members on pilgrimage or to galvanize public support for a particular project such as shrine renovation. Some of those groups eventually grew into the various Shinto sects of modern times. Various groups known as Sodeikai, Ujikokai, and Ujiko Sodei, loose synonyms for associations of parishioners/worshippers, have sprung up all over Japan for the purpose of gathering donations and sponsoring festivals. Unlike some other traditions, Shinto is not famous for developing major internal organizations such as religious or monastic orders that may connect to the fact that the Shinto priesthood itself is historically associated with heredity and clan and has never been an ordained clergy as such. There are, however, exceptions, such as the monastic order that grew out of a sectarian lineage called Yutetsu Shinto.
What is exorcism in Confucianism?
Shamans of ancient times and their deist successors, the black hat and red turban ritual specialists, have generally played the role of exorcists to the Chinese population at large. Confucians and members of the imperial administration might very well have enlisted the services of an exorcist in particular instances. But neither Confucianism nor CIT focuses on matters of this kind, except in relation to ancestor veneration rituals. In a way, attending to the spirits of the dead, whether of the individual family or of the imperial dynasty, seeks to obviate the need for exorcism as such. Proper, sincere, and timely acknowledgement of those spirits reduces the likelihood that frustrated souls will wander abroad with troublesome intent.
What kinds of special ritual objects figure in Confucian and CIT worship?
When Confucius was young, he was particularly intrigued by the classic bronze vessels his ancestors had used for centuries in honoring heaven. Most of these vessels held materials to be offered. The principal forms developed in connection with the particular types of material. A vase, was to hold sacrificial wine, a jug, poured libations. And beaker, may have been used for sharing a communion-like drink. The ding was a bowl for ritual foods such as cereal grains or fruit. Some of these objects apparently were designed in particularly symbolic shapes, such as the hill-shaped censer, whose form recalled the 5 sacred mountains. Some bronzes bear abstract representations of the 4 directional creatures: the black tortoise of the wintry north, the green dragon of the vernal east, the scarlet bird of the summery south, and the white tiger of the autumnal west. Inscriptions dedicating an object to a father, for example, or expressing the hope that sons and grandsons will use the vessel for 10,000 years, suggest that they were commonly used in ancestor veneration rituals. Even today, copies of those antique objects adorn the altars in Confucian temples and are part of the relatively infrequent offerings held there. Many of the sacred vessels were buried in tombs or even thrown into river beds during invasions to prevent them from falling into the hands of barbarians. Nearly every large museum has good examples in its Asian collections, and they are well worth a visit.
What is a kamikaze?
Divine storm blast roughly translates the term kamikaze that so many World War II films brought into relatively common English usage. Japanese began to use the term during the Middle Ages in reference to how the gods fended off the Mongol invaders led by Kublai Khan in 1280, a descendant of Genghis Khan. During World War II, the Japanese Air Force resorted to a desperate tactic when the tide began to turn against Japan. Pilots willing to commit suicide for their nation's honor aimed their explosive-laden dive bombers at enemy warships and went down with them. Ever since then, popular usage has referred to any self-immolating tactic or maneuver born of desperation as a kamikaze mission. However, to identify Shinto narrowly with war or with desperate acts such as those associated with kamikaze pilots is to miss out entirely on an overwhelmingly peaceful and beautiful tradition at whose core is the celebration of life and the sacred riches of creation.
Have women exercised leadership among Shinto practitioners?
In ancient times, women played an indispensable role as shamans in countless Shinto shrines. Even after imperial decrees reduced women's roles in shrine life, giving precedence to a male priesthood, women continued to fill some key positions. Well into the 16th century, for example, women functioned as priestesses in some shrines. The last of the priestesses was a young woman serving the Suwa shrine in Nagasaki. Women have long acted as spirit mediums consulted by many a priest over the centuries, as well as by individual worshippers. Restrictive legislation arising from the Meiji Restoration in 1868 dramatically curtailed women's official participation in shrine staff ministries. Only at the Ise Grand Shrine, sacred to the sun goddess Amaterasu, does a woman currently hold the position of high priestess. During the Second World War, many women took over priestly functions when their husbands departed for military service.
Do Confucians celebrate the birthdays of any religious figures?
September 28th of each year marks the birthday of Confucius in Taiwan. For example, and there it has also been declared Teachers' Day. In the People's Republic of China, celebrations of the day have been forbidden since the Maoist Revolution of 1948. Largely because of Confucianism's long-standing association with imperial rule. Taiwanese celebrations, however, are still elaborate and traditional. Beginning at 6 in the morning according to ancient practice. Ceremonies commence with ritual drumming followed by a procession in which participants, dressed in ancient regalia, carry in special symbols to welcome the spirit of Confucius. Processional symbols include a royal canopy and fan, as well as ritual long-handled axes. In the capital city, Taipei, the celebration is modeled on the ancient pattern in which literati bureaucrats performed the main rituals. There, the mayor presides over the various ranks of governmental employees and educational administrators, joined by ranks of students of different ages. Birthdays of particular deities or immortals do not play a role in Confucianism or CIT as they do in Daoism and CCT.
Do Shinto practitioners mark sacred spaces with any distinctive signs and symbols?
Easily the most important symbol of Shinto sacred spaces is the torii gate, marking the entry and pathways to every shrine. Torii typically consist of a pair of unadorned upright columns and a pair of crossbeams, or lintels, at the top. The upper crossbeam generally sits directly atop the column and protrudes on both sides, while the lower beam either ends at the columns or goes through and protrudes. Some torii have more elaborate uprights and crossbeams. Depending on local and regional architectural styles, devotees give torii as votive offerings to some shrines, lining pathways with hundreds of them inches apart, so that the entry to the shrine feels almost like a covered walkway. According to legend, the torii recalls the perch from which birds sang to entice the sun goddess from her cave. Most Shinto shrines use the simplest and most natural materials available, imitating nature as much as possible. Natural wood grains and the lovely green forest patina that eventually accents thatch or wood shingled roofs gives them a rustic character and charm. Many shrine roofs still display remnants of primitive architectural elements as a reminder of antiquity, although newer building methods no longer require them. Many shrines retain a row of logs called katsuoji set along the ridge beam of the roof. Older structures needed the katsuoji to hold the thatch roof down. Another bit of architectural nostalgia are the vertical extensions of the eave beams above the roof line. As you view a shrine from either front or rear, you notice that the roof line forms an X. Horizontally trimmed upper ends of these beams, known as chiji, mark the shrines of female kami, and vertically trimmed ends those of male kami. Several rather mysterious symbols adorn holy places, whether or not the site has a structure on it. Thick straw ropes called shiminawa mark sacred places such as trees and rocks. Outer portals of shrines, whether actual buildings or miniature models used on home altars, also suspend shiminawa across their facades. Attached to the rope are pieces of white paper cut in zigzag fashion symbolizing offerings to the kami. The same bits of paper are attached to a ritual wand called the goe. Legend has it that the rope originated as a way of restraining the sun goddess from escaping back into her cave.
Where do Shinto practitioners live today? Any estimates of numbers available?
By far the majority of people who identify themselves with Shinto tradition still live in Japan. There are also Shinto shrines in many areas of Asia, and a few elsewhere as well, in which significant Japanese communities have developed. Honolulu's Shinto shrine, for example, is a highly visible sign of a large and prosperous Japanese community there. Accurate statistics as to membership are hard to come by. largely because an increasing number of Japanese do not identify themselves as religious at all, even if they continue to engage in some traditional Shinto practices. We do, however, have fairly reliable information about numbers of shrines and active priests from which we have some idea of the tradition's vitality today. Some 20,000 priests serve between 80,000 and 100,000 shrines.
Are there any signs or symbols that might identify an individual as a practitioner of Shinto?
Apart from times of participation in public or private rituals, it is virtually impossible to identify practitioners of Shinto on the basis of appearances. When people join in festival processions, many don small jackets called happy that extend to about mid-thigh, and headbands. Happy sometimes bear the logo of the local association that carries the mikoshi portable shrine in processions. On special days, young women may dress up in their best kimono. Devotees sometimes return home from shrines carrying amulets or talismans, but these items are visible less often on the person than in the home.
Have Confucians or CIT ordinarily engaged in ritual sacrifice?
Sacrifice of certain animals has long been part of Confucian observances, both of the master's birthday and of certain types of ancestor memorial. Two kinds of ritual sacrifice have also been historically associated with CIT. The Feng, high altar mound, and Shan, level ground. Sacrifices were those offered to heaven and earth, respectively. Some emperors used the public performance of these rituals as a way of declaring and expressing gratitude for their possession of the mandate of heaven. History records that a number of emperors, even down to the last dynasty, engaged in the sacrifices atop or at the foot of sacred mountains. Animals sacrificed ritually most commonly included sheep and pigs, but occasionally wild game animals like deer were also sacrificed. Larger and more expensive ceremonies might feature oxen splayed across a rack after slaughtering, or the burnt offering of a whole young red bull. Red is the color of yang, the energy needed to return warmth to the earth so that spring will renew all living things. In the Temple of Heaven complex, for example, a large slaughterhouse and spirit kitchen accommodated extensive sacrificial needs. 80 butchers and 280 cooks processed vast quantities of material. A year's worth of sacrifices, according to one record, included nearly 1,000 pigs, over 800 sheep, over 200 each of deer, cows, and rabbits, and over 100 goats.
Do Shinto practitioners use special symbolism in personal or private rituals?
Many Japanese households have a special corner dedicated to the kami. A miniature shrine building. Kami-dana, at which worshippers pray daily, is placed on a shelf or table. For special occasions they will go to the actual shrine. But everyday reverence to the kami happens at home. People can purchase these charming miniature shrines, some done up in exquisitely fine architectural detail. At religious goods stores in any Japanese city or at some of the larger shrines. Worshippers who get them from shrine shops often prefer to purchase them at shrines to which their families have ancestral connections. Priests often visit parishioners to dedicate their new home shrines, and sometimes make annual house visits for brief renewal ceremonies. People with more ample homes and yards might afford larger outdoor miniature shrines called yashikigami, kami of the home. Miniature shrines range from simple and affordable to finely wrought and costly. Business establishments, restaurants, police stations, and bridges on ocean-going ships, for example, might also have a kami-dana to which the staff make daily offerings. Many miniature shrines have their own tiny torii gates and shimenawa. In addition, worshippers often bring small votive offerings when they visit local shrines. A popular offering is the miniature torii gate on which devotees write names and prayers of petition before hanging it on a rack along with hundreds of others like it at the shrine.
Do Shinto practitioners run private schools for their children?
Private schools equivalent to parochial educational systems in some other traditions have not been institutionally significant in the history of Shinto. Perhaps the closest thing to structured education in Shinto beliefs and values have been occasional government attempts to insert components of Shinto-i.e. traditional or national Japanese ethics into school curricula. In 1937, for example, the Ministry of Education incorporated themes from an 1890 imperial document on education into a new ethics curriculum called Principles of the National Entity, Kokyutai no Hangi, meant to implement the concept of state Shinto. The document emphasizes the historicity of the classic mythical narratives concerning the emperor's divine descent. It praises unquestioning dedication to the corporate good of the Japanese people under the virtuous rule of the emperor. These pre-war governmental actions, however, are entirely different from the grassroots impulses that gave rise to private religious schools in traditions such as Islam and Christianity. There is really no Shinto parallel. In fact, the Meiji and subsequent regimes attempt to teach ethics from on high, so to speak, explicitly forbade religious education on the local or shrine level. Since World War II, however, numerous shrines throughout Japan have developed programs for children and young people, including nursery schools and kindergartens. But these are exclusively social and cultural, rather than religiously educational, developments.
What is the Confucian and Literati view of ancestor veneration?
Confucius did not invent ancestor veneration, but his teaching placed great emphasis on the practice. Already a millennium old by Confucius' time, ancestor veneration had much to do with the rather utilitarian belief that malcontent spirits of the deceased could cause great trouble. Better to attend to their needs before they became disgruntled. But Confucius stressed a more positive note of reverence for those who have gone before, and of maintaining connections with one's sacred past. So much of what we are is our history. In Korea, descendants of the Yi dynasty still gather annually to perform memorial rites with full traditional costume and music. This Yi dynasty association maintains dynastic memorial tablets in an ancestral shrine in Seoul called Gongmyo. To each of the 18 major Yi rulers enshrined there, the worshippers offer 3 cups of wine and choice food. Scholars often credit Confucian influence in Japan with the continued prevalence of ancestor veneration there.
What are the main architectural and ritual elements of a major Shinto shrine?
At the heart of a major shrine is a complex of 3 units called the Hongwu for a Jingwu, Hansha for a Jinjia. This central area, all oriented to the south as in Chinese sacred structures, houses the shrine's principal deity. Within the Hongwu are the Haiden, and Hondan arranged front to rear along the south-north-central axis. The outer and most public of the spaces is called the Haiden, or worship hall, where devotees gather individually or in small groups for special blessings and other rituals. Most people who come to the shrine without prior arrangements for special ceremonial ministrations from the priestly staff perform their brief prayers in front of the Haiden. But if the staff are performing rituals inside, those outside are welcome to observe. From that hall, worshippers can look across an interior courtyard to the central structure, the Haiden or offering hall, where only the priestly staff perform more sacred rituals. From there, in turn, the celebrants can see, sometimes across yet another courtyard, the Hondan, the Shinto equivalent of the Holy of Holies. There, behind closed doors and visible to no one, the kami reside. Also on the grounds of many large shrines one may find subordinate shrines called beku, which house related major deities. Masha house lesser deities. Some shrines also have small Buddhist temples, called Jingguji, shrine temples, on the property, remnants of the ancient connections between the two traditions.
How are Shinto leaders chosen and given authority?
Shinto priesthood has historically been a hereditary occupation. even after the government officially took over the appointment of chief priests after 1868. Hereditary succession continued in many localities. Perhaps the most important ingredients in maintaining standards among Shinto officials are the two educational institutions now solely responsible for the training of priests. Tokyo's Kokyugakuin, National Learning University, is a relatively recent development. A private university that offers general education as well as the equivalent of Shinto seminary curriculum. It supplies research for the present centralized shrine authority, the Jinjiya Honcho. The Kagaken, Imperial Hall of Learning, University near Ise was originally a public institution that closed after World War II and then reopened in 1952 as a private university. Priests to be study Japanese history and literature, but focus on Shinto studies, especially ritual and theology. Shinto priests are not ordained clergy, strictly speaking. They are laypersons granted certification or licensure upon satisfactory completion of the seminary curriculum and its qualifying exams.
Have relics been important in the Shinto tradition?
Sacred objects play a very important role in Shinto ritual. Every shrine houses some small token of the deity who graciously calls this humble place home for the benefit of worshippers who come to pay their respects. These objects, called Goshintai or revered kami body, are said to include such unremarkable items as a mirror, sword, comb, ball of iron, paintings, pebbles, or pieces of carefully cut paper. Worshippers generally do not get even a passing glimpse of the objects, for they remain always behind the innermost shrine's closed doors. People visit a shrine not so much because the sacred objects are there, as because the presence of the kami makes the place holy. When Christians or Buddhists, for example, make pilgrimage to a special church or stupa, they frequently do so because certain objects associated with a particular sacred person are enshrined there. They may not believe that the objects themselves contain miraculous powers, but it is the presence of the objects that makes the place worth visiting. Shinto's sacred objects play a very different role. Many worshippers may not even be aware of exactly what items a given shrine holds. In other words, the symbols of the kami are of secondary importance from the perspective of Shinto worshippers.
If I visited a Shinto shrine, what would I see?
Walk down almost any street in almost any Japanese city or town and not many blocks along you will notice a simple, unobtrusive torii gate at street side. Turning to your right to look through the gate, you will be surprised to see a small grove of trees in the midst of storefronts and houses. You know from the torii that a Shinto shrine is nearby, but no structure is immediately evident. You walk through the gate and perhaps up a small hill. And as the shrine comes into view amid the trees, you will pass through another torii gate. At the end of the path stands a neighborhood shrine, consisting perhaps of only a single wooden structure. Standing several feet off the ground and too small for a person to enter is the residence of one of the local kami. On the front porch of the shrine, or perhaps alongside the tiny steps that lead up to the porch, there are several small white ceramic foxes, messengers of the deity Inari. Also on the porch just outside the shrine door are small offerings of various kinds, including a little wooden box for donations. Uncounted thousands of these unassuming shrines are quiet testimony to the presence of the divine powers. Larger shrines are naturally fewer in numbers but still abundant. Preserving often relatively extensive tracts of forested land in burgs like Tokyo and Kyoto. The great shrines are all the more remarkable. Even in the heart of bustling Tokyo, for example, the high shrine still sits atop a surprisingly high and densely wooded knoll. As you pass under one and another monumental torii along the pathway to the center of shrines like Tokyo's splendid Meiji-jinggu, you will find yourself slowing down and marveling at the beauty of ancient trees. The sheer power of place here is almost overwhelming, enveloping you with a profound sense of the sacred. At the heart of the place are worshippers, perhaps in large numbers depending on the day, approaching the outer building of the sanctuary to pray and make their offerings. If your timing is right, you might witness formal ceremonies of blessing or priestly offering. Shinto shrines do not present the kind of public face that Japan's numerous Buddhist temples show. Shinto's miniature and not-so-miniature holy forests are vivid reminders of the need to acknowledge the sanctity of nature, especially when the hunger for expediency and immediate gratification compromises reflection.
Have Shinto practitioners traditionally sent out missionaries to convert others?
Shinto has been so closely identified with Japanese culture as to be virtually inseparable from it. A desire to spread Shinto with missionary zeal would make about as much sense as wishing one could turn non-Japanese persons into Japanese. It is as unnecessary as it is impossible. Even the most devoted and active practitioners of Shinto do not generally feel themselves called to spread the tradition. At the heart of Shinto is a natural wisdom that cannot be taught or spread by decree. It is as natural as breathing. Of course, everyone is better off breathing, but it's not something one can teach. Since the tradition is passed on organically, so to speak, and inherited as a family and national treasure, practitioners do not think of it as something necessary for the betterment or salvation of humanity. At the same time, active members of local Shinto communities remain hospitable to a fault. Arrive at a shrine during a festival, and however much you may stand out from the crowd, chances are good that someone will invite you to participate in the celebration.
Is there such a thing as Shinto art or aesthetic?
Every 20 years, priests and specially skilled carpenters gather at the grand shrine at ISE for a ritual that says a lot about Shinto artistic sensibilities. They construct a new inner shrine on a plot left vacant for the previous 20 years. Then they dismantle the older shrine separated by only a small partition and leave its space empty until it is time to rebuild there. The carpenters use only the finest cypress, fashioned with the simplest of tools, and use no nails, adhesives, or artificially produced material of any kind. Each stroke of the plane or hammer is part of an ancient ritual that blends religious reverence and awe with the practical demands of sacred architecture. Each structure, however small and humble, is a work of sacred craftsmanship. During the Middle Ages, Shinto sculptors created anthropomorphic images of various kami, largely under the influence of Buddhism's rich iconography. Some sculptures remain important symbols in a few individual devotional cults within Shinto, such as Suno Ichijitsu, with its images of the kami's monkey messengers. But on the whole, modern Shinto worship is aniconic, focusing on the presence of symbolic objects, such as the mirror and sword, within the Holy of Holies. A unique and historically important art form is the so-called shrine mandala. Stylized depictions of individual shrines arrange the sacred site as a meditative device on a hanging scroll. Members of certain sects have used these mandalas as devotional focuses of esoteric contemplative rituals. Above all, shrines and their settings remain the most important visual expression of Shinto beliefs and values. Simple, natural beauty is the key.
What are some of the main varieties of Shinto officials or specialists?
Shinto tradition refers to the priesthood in general as either Shinshoku or Kanishi. Larger shrines with full priestly staffs distinguish among a number of ranks. The chief priest is called the Guji, generally the highest-ranking local official. Guji might have oversight of up to 30 subordinate shrines. The Gonguji is second in command and oversees a staff of several lower ranks as well, including junior assistant chief priests, Shingonguji. Senior priests are called Negi, assistant senior priests Gonnegi, and regular priests Shutten or Kyujo, fill out the ranks of male staff. A national ranking system also distinguishes among priests by acknowledging their levels of learning with the equivalent of academic degrees, named purity, Jokai, brightness, Maikai, righteousness, Sekai, and uprightness, Chakai. Young unmarried women, called shrine maidens, Maiko, function rather like deaconesses. Dressed in striking vermilion skirts and white blouses, they assist in blessing rituals, run the shrine shop, and perform sacred dance. Miko traditionally begin their association with the shrine and training for service as sacred children. Highest in rank is the unique position called Saishu, found only at the ISE shrine and held by a woman. She is an imperial princess with the symbolic title Master of the Matsuri, festivals. Assisting her is a priest with the rank of Daigyoji, Great Chief Priest, a function unique to ISE. In the imperial household, ritual specialists have either of two ranks. The Shoten parallels the shrine rank of senior priest. The Shoten that of assistant senior priest. But the emperor himself or a personal delegate presides. Much as the Chinese sovereign once did, at over 24 annual ceremonies.
Is there such a thing as a Shinto saint?
Many exemplary human beings have been identified and revered as kami after their deaths. Since the category of kami is an all-inclusive grouping of forces and persons considered above the merely human, Shinto tradition has no need of an intermediary category such as that of saint. Most traditions that discuss sainthood in one form or another do so out of one of two convictions. In some traditions the deity is so exalted and transcendent that ordinary human beings can scarcely imagine approaching it directly. Saints function as intermediaries because they share the humanity of devotees and are thus more approachable. Other traditions, however, elevate certain persons not as intermediaries or intercessors, but as examples of lofty yet attainable perfection. Shinto stands alone here in the sense that the kami are everywhere and thus perfectly accessible, and that certain human beings are themselves kami.
Is there such a thing as a Shinto saint?
Many exemplary human beings have been identified and revered as kami after their deaths. Since the category of kami is an all-inclusive grouping of forces and persons considered above the merely human, Shinto tradition has no need of an intermediary category such as that of saint. Most traditions that discuss sainthood in one form or another do so out of one of two convictions. In some traditions the deity is so exalted and transcendent that ordinary human beings can scarcely imagine approaching it directly. Saints function as intermediaries because they share the humanity of devotees and are thus more approachable. Other traditions, however, elevate certain persons not as intermediaries or intercessors, but as examples of lofty yet attainable perfection. Shinto stands alone here in the sense that the kami are everywhere and thus perfectly accessible, and that certain human beings are themselves kami.
Have prophets played a role in Shinto tradition?
Shinto tradition does not revolve around a revealed truth or set of beliefs considered inaccessible without divine intervention. Therefore, prophets have not figured prominently in its history. Arguably Shinto's closest functional analogy to the classic prophet are the various founders of sectarian groups who criticized the imperial system. Not unlike the prophets of the Semitic traditions. Some of them have played the role of an accusatory conscience, especially in modern times.
Have prophets played a role in Shinto tradition?
Shinto tradition does not revolve around a revealed truth or set of beliefs considered inaccessible without divine intervention. Therefore, prophets have not figured prominently in its history. Arguably Shinto's closest functional analogy to the classic prophet are the various founders of sectarian groups who criticized the imperial system. Not unlike the prophets of the Semitic traditions. Some of them have played the role of an accusatory conscience, especially in modern times.
How do trials or ordeals function in Shinto ritual?
Remnants of ancient practices reminiscent of trial by fire survive in several Shinto ceremonies, most of which are still practiced, in relatively few locations. Unique to the Suwa Shrine in Nagasaki is a frightening ritual called Yoteitsai. At the end of the purification and exorcism rituals, the chief priest of the shrine thrusts his hand into a kettle of boiling water. This rite dates back to the Shugendo sect of late medieval times. Now it represents not the ascetic or magical power of ancient practitioners, or the power to banish spirits possessing an unfortunate soul, but the need for radical purification. Some sects use a variation on this ritual, with a priest scattering scalding water on the main participant with a bamboo stick. A related ritual of trial involves walking over burning coals, called Shinkashiki, taming the fire. The ceremony involves circumambulating the bed of embers before walking across it. Anyone present may participate after the principal ritualists complete the ordeal. Again, the purpose is purification, and prayers may include petitioning the kami of the moon to exert his influence on the fire kami.
How do trials or ordeals function in Shinto ritual?
Remnants of ancient practices reminiscent of trial by fire survive in several Shinto ceremonies, most of which are still practiced, in relatively few locations. Unique to the Suwa Shrine in Nagasaki is a frightening ritual called Yoteitsai. At the end of the purification and exorcism rituals, the chief priest of the shrine thrusts his hand into a kettle of boiling water. This rite dates back to the Shugendo sect of late medieval times. Now it represents not the ascetic or magical power of ancient practitioners, or the power to banish spirits possessing an unfortunate soul, but the need for radical purification. Some sects use a variation on this ritual, with a priest scattering scalding water on the main participant with a bamboo stick. A related ritual of trial involves walking over burning coals, called chinkashiki, taming the fire. The ceremony involves circumambulating the bed of embers before walking across it. Anyone present may participate after the principal ritualists complete the ordeal. Again, the purpose is purification, and prayers may include petitioning the kami of the moon to exert his influence on the fire kami.
Does the shaman have a place in Shinto?
In ancient times, shamanesses were very important in Shinto circles. Today the shrine maidens, Maiko, may represent a vestige of that ritual specialization of long ago. Blind female shamans called Itako still ply their trade in various parts of Japan. Strict asceticism marks the apprenticeship of young blind girls to older teachers. After lengthy training, the aspirant marries a kami symbolically to secure spiritual power and protection. Shamanesses perform the service of connecting with the kami world, sometimes functioning as spirit mediums. Some of the so-called new religions with Shinto roots give prominent roles to shamanesses. Ancient Shinto tradition associates certain forms of spirit possession with shamanesses, explaining their extraordinary powers in special circumstances. Newer sects such as Tenrikyo acknowledge that male or female shamans experience a kami descent, kami-gakari, in which the deity totally takes over the human being.
Does the shaman have a place in Shinto?
In ancient times, shamanesses were very important in Shinto circles. Today the shrine maidens, Maiko, may represent a vestige of that ritual specialization of long ago. Blind female shamans called Itako still ply their trade in various parts of Japan. Strict asceticism marks the apprenticeship of young blind girls to older teachers. After lengthy training, the aspirant marries a kami symbolically to secure spiritual power and protection. Shamanesses perform the service of connecting with the kami world, sometimes functioning as spirit mediums. Some of the so-called new religions with Shinto roots give prominent roles to shamanesses. Ancient Shinto tradition associates certain forms of spirit possession with shamanesses, explaining their extraordinary powers in special circumstances. Newer sects such as Tenrikyo acknowledge that male or female shamans experience a kami descent, kami-gakari, in which the deity totally takes over the human being.
Do adherents of Shinto believe in angels?
Perhaps the closest formal analogy to the angel in Shinto tradition are the tennin, the Japanese version of Buddhism's celestial nymphs called apsaras. They are spirits, but other than that, they do not function quite the way angels do in other traditions. Lovely celestial beings have sometimes been said to descend and dance in response to divinely beautiful music. If we focus on the functional parallels on angels as messengers of the divine world, Shinto offers a number of analogies. But they don't look at all like angels. These messengers are, for example, Inari's fox and the monkey assistant of Suno, the mountain king. Another functional aspect of angels is that of protection and generally mediating peace and blessing. Shinto psychology divides soul or spirit into two main types: positive and negative. Nijamitama are the benign spirits that either bestow blessing on or effect spiritual changes in people or natural objects. In that sense, they function somewhat like angelic spirits. But they were not necessarily created as spirits as angels are. They can be the spirits of the deceased that continue to roam the cosmos. A post-war sect called Byakko Shinkokai, however, focused on a modified version of the guardian angel as an essential spiritual power.
Do adherents of Shinto believe in angels?
Perhaps the closest formal analogy to the angel in Shinto tradition are the Tennin, the Japanese version of Buddhism's celestial nymphs called apsaras. They are spirits, but other than that, they do not function quite the way angels do in other traditions. Lovely celestial beings have sometimes been said to descend and dance in response to divinely beautiful music. If we focus on the functional parallels on angels as messengers of the divine world, Shinto offers a number of analogies. But they don't look at all like angels. These messengers are, for example, Inari's fox and the monkey assistant of Suno, the mountain king. Another functional aspect of angels is that of protection and generally mediating peace and blessing. Shinto psychology divides soul or spirit into two main types: positive and negative. Nijamitama are the benign spirits that either bestow blessing on or effect spiritual changes in people or natural objects. In that sense, they function somewhat like angelic spirits. But they were not necessarily created as spirits as angels are. They can be the spirits of the deceased that continue to roam the cosmos. A post-war sect called Byakko Shinkokai, however, focused on a modified version of the guardian angel as an essential spiritual power.
What about devils or demons?
Numerous demons, oni, inhabit the cosmos of popular Shinto belief. But their particular province is the north. They are associated with negative forces generally and bad luck. Rough spirits, Arimitama, are among the larger category of generic spirits or souls. A category of beings called Onryo consists of angry spirits. Other beings called Goryo, or august spirits, are also generally troublesome but deserving of respect for their power. Some of Shinto's most important shrines are known as Goryo shrines. Because the kami dwelling there was once a human being who died under inauspicious circumstances. Another large category of evil spirits is that of bakemono, a term that refers to several specific groups of beings especially prevalent in folklore.
What about devils or demons?
Numerous demons, oni, inhabit the cosmos of popular Shinto belief. But their particular province is the north. They are associated with negative forces generally and bad luck. Rough spirits, Aramitama, are among the larger category of generic spirits or souls. A category of beings called Onryo consists of angry spirits. Other beings called Goryo, or august spirits, are also generally troublesome but deserving of respect for their power. Some of Shinto's most important shrines are known as Goryo shrines. Because the kami dwelling there was once a human being who died under inauspicious circumstances. Another large category of evil spirits is that of bakemono, a term that refers to several specific groups of beings especially prevalent in folklore.
Have dreams and visions or other spirit manifestations been important in Shinto tradition?
Shinto legends are full of famous figures who have enjoyed or barely survived encounters with the spirit world. Many religiously prominent individuals have claimed to receive divine visitations and privileged communications in dreams. Various spirits, even evil ones, Goryo, are capable of making their presence known for the purpose of delivering a message. These spirits, also called living human kami, arahitogame, can return in their human form to make things both positive and negative happen in the land of the living. Certain famous people, like Prince Shotoku Taishi, 574 to 622, and poet calligrapher Sugawara Michizane, 845 to 903, to whom over 10,000 shrines are dedicated, who died untimely or violent deaths later became kami, but could also exert unhappy influence if not dealt with properly. This is a striking amalgam of positive and negative powers in one spirit. Such a spirit can manifest itself in frightening apparitions as well as in blessings.
Have dreams and visions or other spirit manifestations been important in Shinto tradition?
Shinto legends are full of famous figures who have enjoyed or barely survived encounters with the spirit world. Many religiously prominent individuals have claimed to receive divine visitations and privileged communications in dreams. Various spirits, even evil ones, Goryo, are capable of making their presence known for the purpose of delivering a message. These spirits, also called living human kami, arahitogame, can return in their human form to make things both positive and negative happen in the land of the living. Certain famous people, like Prince Shotoku Taishi, 574 to 622, and poet calligrapher Sugawara Michizane, 845 to 903, to whom over 10,000 shrines are dedicated, who died untimely or violent deaths later became kami, but could also exert unhappy influence if not dealt with properly. This is a striking amalgam of positive and negative powers in one spirit. Such a spirit can manifest itself in frightening apparitions as well as in blessings.